It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about UFC on the White House lawn. We are also going to take a look at some financials from KSW and Tyson Fury. We're going to take a brief look at a comment that Nakisa Bidarian made today. We're going to talk about Rico Verhoeven versus Francis Ngannou and if that's actually going to happen. We have so much for you guys today, but if you want to get access to all of it, you really need to subscribe. So, John, how the heck are you?
Great. I just have my cat, who's just impeccable when I start the show. She comes and she attacks the mic at the beginning of every show. So I try to mute that so you people do not hear the feedback. But other than that, I'm doing spectacular.
Awesome. Love to hear that. So I guess we should jump right in here and talk about the announcement Donald Trump made just this past week, saying that the UFC would be bringing an event to the White House lawn. Does this signify anything in particular to you?
Well, I think it signifies how enmeshed the UFC is in the culture wars currently, the political culture wars.
Does it look like they might be manipulating the broadcast deal?
Well, I guess you have to explain. What do you mean by manipulating the broadcast deal?
To me, it seemed like, and I could be out on conspiracy lane here, but it seemed like maybe Donald Trump made that announcement to sort of aid the UFC in getting the $1 billion number that they're looking for. By creating feeding frenzy?
I guess the better conspiracy might be that Donald Trump fed this idea that they could do a UFC event at the White House as they're negotiating with Netflix, who wants spectacles, live spectacles. And like, we can guarantee you one, we're going to have a fight at the on the White House lawn. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yes, that, he almost ensured a big broadcast rights deal.
Yeah, well, that goes kind of hand in hand. I don't know if he guaranteed, but that kind of goes hand in hand with what I said earlier. They're immersed in the political, tribal culture wars. And to be in disclosure here, full disclosure, one of the problems when you talk politics, we're not a political show. We don't talk politics per se, except how it does in the fight business. But, I guess listeners probably know I probably lean on the progressive liberal side, although I don't identify as a political party because I do that only because I don't want to feel like I've blinded myself, but the truth is I'm going to vote Democrats because if you look at what I believe politically, there's the only people that represent that are a group of people on the Democratic Party side, not the whole party. Got, a lot of complaints for a lot of other people on the center left, but that group. So, that's my disclosure. So when people are saying I hate Trump and I'm partisan, yeah, somewhat. I do not like a lot of what Trump does. But with the UFC, there's two things to consider. One is your conspiracy. That's a possibility. And I don't even know if it's that outlandish conspiracy, considering how Donald Trump works, because you see how he pushes meme coins and fragrances on his accounts and all the other stuff he's willing to push. And Dana White's been a big supporter, help to him, that he gets a lot of benefit by being culturally linked to the UFC. I could see that. The other thing is that the UFC, again, as we talk about these cultural divides, the country is so partisan now, so split politically that politics has become our identity. People, and that's why I try intentionally not to identify as being part of a party, even though it's obvious which side I'm on, because I'm trying to prevent my brain from getting locked in that because then you get sucked in these culture wars where you dislike the other person just because of who they support. not for who they are. But the UFC, that's what they're becoming. They're coming kind of these culture wars that they're anti-woke. They have a domineering boss. They have which is strangely weirdly has become a identifying feature of the right, and that doesn't have to be, but that's what it's become. They're very much laissez-faire free market capitalism in many ways, even though they're not, because it's a monopoly that's taken over the industry. But all these cultural signifiers. But the trick here I'm getting to is there's a great book, and I don't know if you've ever read this. People out there haven't read it. Called "Let Them Eat Tweets" by Jacob Hacker and Michael Pearson, I think the authors. And they talk about for years what the Republican Party, the old Republican Party, did, which is they were very, they did stuff very pro-business, but you can't, the public hates those type of bills. They hate bills that are at the benefit of rich people and businesses over regular people, so they won't vote for that. Mitch McConnell, I think, is the perfect, example of this. They would push bills like heavy, big tax cuts and austerity. Stuff the public generally hates, but the way they get drawn votes, the strategy they outline in this book is they would do red meat on the culture war stuff. They would rile up people on the culture war, and often you got to say too, on the culture war, often the Republicans too, even though they're riling people up, is they're on the right side of the split of what the public, what they approve. And it's funny enough, that's, I see that again right now with the big, beautiful bill being passed. It's a bill that's terrible for regular people, great for businesses, but we get all focused on the culture war stuff. And now the UFC seems to be almost a willing participant that they are going to be part of the culture war, that the UFC is one that we're going to take a side on the culture war, and we're going to represent a side, and we're going to fully embrace a side of this political culture war divide. So that long-winded way, I think it does both at the same time. One is I think it's a symbolic of the UFC's evolving nature and the evolving nature of, culture and politics. And two is because they're doing their part for Donald Trump and his team being part of the culture wars, maybe they are getting rewarded by being, just this being floated, even if it doesn't actually happen.
Do you think that the card actually happens, though?
I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, we did the parade for Trump's birthday and the 250th anniversary of the Army. We did that. We've done a few of the things he really wants to see done, that he gets enamored with. I mean, maybe we do. Maybe Trump has. Maybe we inaugurate the immigrant championship. Remember when you talked about that, the migrant champion?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we bring back the migrant champion, and we'll have that this week. I do not want to say it's impossible that it happens. It does not happen, because it does sound like they're planning big events for the 250th. He loves spectacle and images, and I think that is something that would fit right into it. And honestly, I could see the UFC floating it and pushing it, because again, it's and TKO, the executives over there, Dana White, I think they would love to have such an image and be pushed, even though a lot of us people might not like this choice by the UFC to be on the culture wars. It's a big opportunity for them, because again, the country's pretty split, politically, culturally. And if you become the sport of one half of the country, that's a massive market, especially from where the UFC used to be. So you could be sacrificing half the market because they politically can't stand you anymore. But if you gain one half of the population, that you're the sport of choice for them, that's a probably tremendous boost to the UFC.
Now, fighters are crawling out of the woodwork to be on this card, including Conor McGregor and the recently retired Jon Jones. Do you envision either of them, both of them, actually getting on this card?
I don't. Well, I mean, it's hard to say. If it's Netflix, it's possible, because they could maybe be spending a ton on it than Netflix, because they imagine massive ratings. The other possibility for a card like this, in some ways, like the Sphere show, because they know there will be interest in just the spectacle of the show. I guess the first Fight Island was the same way. There was such intrigue by it that you did not have to have the biggest fights. I mean, the Fight Island had Leon Edwards. Wasn't he the original opponent for Usman on that one?
Yes.
Yes, and he fell out. And Masvidal, I mean, at the time, Masvidal was kind of a star, a big star, one of the biggest in the UFC. So they kind of lucked into that. But the original plan wasn't to put that kind of star power on the card. I think the situation, the scenario, the location was going to draw a lot of the buyers. The same with the Sean O'Malley being on the Sphere show. Even though he was, they're grooming him as a star, but he was not. It was not like they put Conor McGregor or John Jones or the biggest stars on those shows. And I think that's why they would be thinking of this. And my thinking is this would be, one, it's not going to be a pay-per-view. And two, I think I'm just guessing from the UFC. I have no idea, just going on based on previous history. I would think they would look at it and say, we need a decent card, but the location alone, the environment alone will draw people, whatever viewers we get. And so for that reason, we are not going to go, the biggest stars possible. Although, unless John Jones knows that's the only way they'll come back, maybe that will be a deciding factor. If they said something like that, we will only come back for this event. But again, it depends too. Is it part of the Netflix deal? If it's part of the Netflix deal, then they might have more money, more willingness to spend on these gigantic shows and gigantic ratings.
Are we sure it's going to be Netflix?
We have no idea. None. This could be YouTube for all we know. This could be Fight Pass. This could be whatever. This could be PBS public broadcasting for Donald Trump. But I would imagine, I guess, if it is Netflix, then they might have a bigger show and a bigger spectacle and stuff. It will not be like they did say 20 to 25,000 people. And sometimes when Donald Trump talks, because he has no filter, he even releases, information that he was told, that's supposed to be sealed on like the number of casualties in Russia and Ukraine. He'll just blurt them out to the public. That almost felt like someone told him a number that would be possible to build how big of stage they could possibly build arena on the White House location. And he blurted that out. So 25,000, a massive arena, that tells me it'd be a bigger show. I'm going to guess. I do think that they get a Netflix deal. They seem desperate to get a Netflix deal. How many shows they get's the question. And if Netflix wants spectacles, they want big, Tyson versus Jake Paul type spectacles. This would definitely fit that description.
One last question on Netflix before we move on. Is it possible that with this announcement that Netflix maybe throws in for more than just the spectacle shows, like maybe they go for the whole enchilada?
I mean, it's possible. I still just don't see Netflix jumping in 2 feet, because one big issue is that the UFC wants a lot of money for those pay-per-views. They're getting paid a lot of money right now for the pay-per-view content. And if they're going to make it get a new broadcast deal that pays them a lot more, then they're going to have to get a markup on the pay for those pay-per-views. And I don't see Netflix. I find it hard to believe that they'd be interested in 12 to 14 pay-per-view type, numbered events per year, considering, look at what's on most of those pay-per-views. Look at the number of sales they get, how big of audience. They would not draw numbers that I think Netflix wants to see for live content. They want NFL numbers. They want Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson numbers. Maybe not quite that big, but good numbers. And I think the biggest fights in the UFC can do that. Several fights can do that in MMA. The Kimbo Slices, they probably need to find the next Kimbo Slice. But those fights could. But then you have a question: is what Netflix is going to offer going to offset what the pay-per-view price would be, what you get for pay-per-view for the very biggest fights? And so I still tend to believe that ESPN, which has proven to be a great partner on the pay-per-views, even though it's down from where it started during its high point, I think they'll end up with a big lump sum or a large amount of the pay-per-view numbered events. Because the only way you can recoup the money for how much UFC wants is through pay-per-view. And then several of the fights per year will be on Netflix.
All right. Now, we mentioned Conor because he was one of the first ones to jump on this I want to be on the card. He'll be having a big announcement alongside Bare Knuckle FC head honcho David Feldman on the 10th. What do you think that might be?
Well, I have no insight on this, so this is purely a guess. But based on the financial problems Triller has, my guess is that they've either found someone to purchase BKFC. They themselves are acquiring BKFC. Maybe because of there's some deal that was written into the contract, negotiated, that they can purchase it back. Or I guess the last one would be that they're going to announce some major event, and I just can't see the UFC letting Conor McGregor fight on it, but they announce a major event and then Conor McGregor's fighting on it. That's the third possibility, I think.
I saw something with Eddie Hearn and Bare Knuckle FC with a little mini announcement of their own that they're going to be coming up on. Could it be anything with that? You
know what? I completely spaced on that. I remember that, but that shows you how much I think about BKFC and Eddie Hearn working with them. That's a possibility too, that they're thinking of an event. I mean, maybe they're thinking of an event. I mean, it would be something. Is there anybody Eddie Hearn has that they could put against Conor McGregor? I mean, I probably shouldn't jump on because Conor McGregor is the biggest name. We always want to throw out that he'll be doing something, and he's probably just going to be owner. He has an ownership stake in the company because he's a brand ambassador. They're giving him a piece of it, so he probably is just there to be the spokesperson to draw attention. It has nothing else to do with whatever they're going to announce. But I imagine it's a purchase, a big fight, or maybe Matchroom's acquiring them. Who knows? But I got a feeling it has something to do with them being sold by Triller. That's my guess, because Triller's finances or their lack of them, because they haven't filed them for anybody to peruse for a while, that makes me believe that they're being unloaded.
All right. Jon Anik, he floated the idea of shaving 10 events per year off of the UFC schedule. What are your thoughts on that?
10 events being the fight nights, right?
I believe so.
I mean, that'd be an amazing improvement to the product for us, the viewers, because then you'd have, let's say, 1/3 of the events would be the pay-per-view. So every month you'd have a big event, and then you'd have 2 fight night caliber per month. So there'd be less events. You could put better fights on them. You could put more focus on those events. There'd be more anticipation. So that would be great. The one problem would be the UFC would make less doing that. And because they would make less, I guess that's why I'm sure they will not do it. It's so from our point of view as a fan, I do think 30 events per year, he said -10, 32 events per year would be a drastic improvement on the product, what you could deliver to people. A big problem too, and I don't hear enough complaints because everybody's like, oh, every weekend I need MMA, and I can only assume you're a degenerate gambler when you talk that way, because otherwise, who wants to see whatever, random fighters just thrown in the cage and fighting? And you can get that on the regional scene. You can get that on other promotions. You can get that on, Fight Pass. The fact that he needs that on UFC makes me question, and I have to assume you're a degenerate gambler, because that's the only people I can believe that need to watch in every UFC are the ones that feel the need to bet on it. But if you did have fewer events, I mean, the anticipation discussion would just improve the culture around UFC, the fan base, their interest level, the type of fans you have. I think that'd be a big improvement, because if people remember how MMA used to be, how the UFC used to be, there was more of that. The more discussions of the fights, more build up and anticipation of fights, and I think that'd be a tremendous improvement. It's not going to happen. You're cutting out a couple hundred million probably in revenue right there, and another 100, and because they're their profit margins, so it's several $100 million in revenue. That's $100 million in profit. Not going to happen.
All right. Let's jump into some boxing, because Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was arrested and is in ICE detention waiting to be deported, or he may have already been deported. At last check, he was still in ICE detention. What do you make of that whole thing?
It's hard for me to say much, because we have details coming from from Mexico, from a Homeland Security press release, but we haven't had confirmation. His father stood and defended him, so we don't know the full. It hasn't progressed far enough so I could really make a judgment call. I mean, one thing I'll say, the one thing to me just I could believe someone in Mexico has ties to the cartels, especially, to look at his girlfriend or his girlfriend right now, or fiance. I can't remember if they're married or not, but she has she's the mother of I think the goddaughter, or granddaughter, I should say, of Chapo.
Mhm.
So, I mean, she has some connections to cartels there. It's cartels are big, very important in Mexico. They're very powerful, very influential. They've embedded themselves in the culture. So it's not surprising that people in the fight business, kind of like, if you're in the MMA in Japan, you've dealt with the Yakuza. I imagine it's somewhat similar in Mexico. So I wouldn't be shocked at that. The one part that just I did not read as truthful is the idea that they would tie people up and use them bring them in to use as punching bags. And that sounded fantastical, to tell you the truth. Now, did it maybe happen once that someone got upset? Yeah, there's always a chance. But the idea that this guy who was living part-time in America still had apparently some money, that they would call him up and string up people for him to beat up as a punching bag. That sounds like, then supposedly there is transcripts and audio recordings. That sounds like you're really reading into what was just a statement of what, either of just a wild statement of something that possibly could happen, or just it seems fantastical. I really find that one hard to believe. But the rest, I mean, it's too early to say.
But what did you make of the timing of it, though?
The timing is the one that's really surprising, because they had the information on him. They had supposedly a warrant to get rid of him the day before the fight, and that they waited till after. It just makes me question about that. And one thing too, we're just joking. We were saying Conor McGregor will come for the event at the White House. I mean, if we are deporting criminal aliens, does Conor McGregor, should he be nervous about showing up in America to fight? So and that's kind of a joke, but I mean, kind of truthful too. I know there's not a warrant out for him, but they have a lot of leeway. Our Border Patrol and ICE now. But the timing was a little suspicious that they didn't do it earlier. It does make me wonder if that they're a little forgiving to fight promotions here in the U.S. The Border Patrol. It also makes me wonder. We had talked about earlier, and other people brought up the idea that Canelo's fan base might be a little hesitant to buy tickets and show up for the event in Vegas against Crawford. And I think this adds kind of fuel to the fire, because even if, let's say it's accurate that he really did these things, Chavez Jr., and this is not like they're just randomly picking up Mexicans, it's still the messaging that's gotten out there, the belief amongst a lot of people is that ICE is out looking for Mexicans, and it's not just, a lot of people here in LA are even kind of worried that it's the idea that ICE, even though large share of the ICE agents and Border Patrol agents out here are Hispanic themselves, is that they're out, that there's a chance they could round up any person they suspect of being a foreigner, even if they are an American citizen. So I would not be shocked if that somewhat cools demand, that the number of fans from Mexico that come out here to watch it is weakened, and that even the number of fans in the United States that might travel for events like this is a little softer than usual.
Let's talk about Rico Verhoeven versus Francis Ngannou, because Rico Verhoeven said that there is potentially a Glory PFL co-promotion in the works for those two. Does this sound like a real possibility to you?
I think it is. I've talked to people, and it does sound like it's actually in the works, that PFL and Glory have both liked the idea and agreed to it. That the big discussion is, I think, getting the Saudis on board, and the Saudis seem somewhat enthusiastic, but remember, there's different groups of Saudis. Some of them are fully on board with the UFC TKO. And so I don't know if they're working with those ones or working with the other agencies, groups. But I think that it's all going to come down to, will the Saudis cover it? Because if the Saudis are interested, if they like the idea, then I think this is a done deal, that they will do this 3-round, 3 different, mixed style.
That was going to be my next question, is what you thought of that mess.
Well, we'll get to that in just a sec. I'll go back to that in a sec. But if the Saudis agree to it, it'll happen because they're the ones. Remember, people talk about France is bankrupting PFL, and my understanding was they got a huge site fee for that one France. So in some ways, France's cards, the Ngannou cards, are some of the few cards that probably do not lose money because they're being bankrolled almost completely by the Saudis. And so it's all, if the Saudis are into this fight will happen. I think that's the number one. That's the big takeaway. Now on the rule set, well, you have to do something to make it, comparable to Belgrado. And one did the same thing. I think maybe they looked at the success one had with it for drawing an audience. They think that the gimmick will help draw fans. I think it's somewhat stupid, but there's a long history of stupid spectacle in combat sports being entertaining. Remember when Shinya Aoki fought the kickboxer?
Yes.
And this is one of the great matches of all time. And they had mixed rules. The first round was kickboxing rules. The second round was K1 kickboxing rule. The second round was mixed martial arts rules. And if people have not seen this, I cannot remember the name of the opponent. The guy used to come out in cosplay dressed as a female anima character. One of the great pride events, fights, combat sports events of all time. Guy walks out dressed as a little schoolgirl, fights Shinya Aoki, who was at this point wore his weird pants, and he was breaking arms and giving people the finger after he broke their shoulder. Just a scary nerd. And the whole first round, Shinya Aoki, almost like a straight out of an 80s pro wrestling match, ran from him the whole time as the crowd was booing. Next round came out, he's going to win because now you're allowed grappling, run straight into a flying knee, boom, it's over. I mean, you couldn't choreograph that better. That was just so as you can tell, people, I really like that fight. So maybe we'll get the same out of this. It seems absurd. It seems kind of a waste of France Ngannou, but when you don't have many options, this seems like a better option right now than him fighting, I mean, maybe you could build up Nemkov, but anyone coming out of those PFL heavyweight tournaments, doesn't it?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You mentioned one. Now that you've had a little more time to look over one's financial statement, have other details or thoughts come to you since then? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!